Good morning. Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. My name is Gene Barr. I'm here subbing in this morning for Terry Madonna. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to hear a little bit about how we can create better paying jobs here in the Commonwealth. We're also going to hear a little bit about somebody who's going to help us take the mystery out of polling. Be our first guest, and we'll be back after this.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host.
I know you're all very much enjoying watching all those political commercials these days, and part of that also includes hearing a lot about polling. Well, today we have a guest who's going to help us take some of the mystery out of all those terms you hear about, like sample size and plus and minus and margin of error and all those things. So we're pleased to have with us today Christopher Nicholas, who's the principal of Eagle Consulting. So Chris, welcome here. Tell us a little bit about what Eagle Consulting is before we get started.
Hi, Gene. Eagle Consulting Group is a Republican political consulting firm, and we help our clients talk to voters. That's what political consultants do. Part of that involves doing survey research, polling. So I've been doing that since 1991.
Good. So this is a very basic question. What's a poll?
A poll is when you talk to voters in a particular district and ask them what their opinions are, what their feelings are about candidates and issues. The word poll, the word survey, they're interchangeable. And sample size is essentially just how many people we talk to in the survey. So you have to talk to enough people to make it scientifically correct. So your minimum is usually 300 to 400 in a district, like for state senate or county commissioner. And when you do statewide polls, you want to be up in the 600 to 800 range.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the terms, as I referenced earlier. So registered voter is pretty obvious. It's someone who is registered to vote.
So people who do what I do for a living, we have access through a couple of different commercial firms that host the voter file. When we say voter file, that's the voter list. And these companies add things to it like phone number and census data. So as a pollster, we say, okay, I need a representative sample of, suppose we're doing a poll, we're in Dauphin County today. So I want to do a poll of Dauphin County voters. I would say I need to get 12 or 13,000 phone numbers to call, because the way you talk to people is either on the phone, their landline or their cell line, or you can text them. Some people email them, but I don't do that. So that's kind of how you figure it out. And then that is a random sample of everybody in this instance, Dauphin County. So if you play your cards right, which we do because we do it for a living, and you call through, you'll have a representative sample of Dauphin County. So the right proportion of Republicans to Democrats to independents. When you're doing a voter survey, you're only talking to people who are registered to vote. That's what that voter file tells you. And you get a representative sample of men and women and the regions. The other way to do polling is to talk to likely voters.
That's what I was going to ask you, because likely voters, and in fact, that's considered to be a more reliable estimate of what the numbers really are, correct?
So I don't want to confuse anybody because we're here to demystify, but there's no one set definition of likely voter. My definition may be different than yours. But in general, what it means is someone that has a demonstrated history of voting in a certain election, which we can tell by looking at the voter file, or we ask them how likely you're to vote, and you can use words or you can use numbers, 1 to 10, 1 to 100, something like that. And that way we know, okay, we're separating the wheat from the chaff, because not every registered voter, even in a presidential year, goes to the polls or votes by mail, whatever, and participates. So I took an Uber over here, and the fellow has been a citizen for 7 years, but has never registered to vote yet. So as I got out of the car, I gave him the web address to go do that, because now there's no forms. You just do it online. So when we call you on the phone, first of all, please answer your phone and talk to us, right? Because that makes it slightly easier for us, slightly less expensive for our clients.
Which is something else I want to talk about. Probably in the next segment. We're going to be cutting here in a minute.
So we then talk to these likely voters, and because you're coming down to people more likely to vote, it usually gives you a more direct reasoning of what's going to happen. But you don't ask likely voters in March or April. You wait until post-Labor Day. That gives people a better idea to know that they're going to vote and figure it out. So in years past, moving from registered to likely voters helped Republicans. Now it helps Democrats.
Let me give you a little bit and ask you to come back and answer, because we're going to be moving away here just in a moment. Likely voters, I assume the weather impacts, and we also, there's another term which I'll ask you to talk about when we come back, which is enthusiasm.
Okay.
I assume that when one party is more enthusiastic about voting versus the other, what typically happens is the weather might deter them or something else might deter. I would imagine there's probably some truth in that. So,
In politics, I like to say there are two types of people, voters and everybody else.
good. Let's pick up on that when we come back. We're going to cut away here for a commercial break. Thank you.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. We're here with Christopher Nicholas of Eagle Consulting, and before we broke, we were talking a little bit about, so quickly, enthusiasm. One side typically, and you guys measure this, typically one party might be more enthusiastic about the election than the other. I assume that would impact who the likely voters are, right?
We extrapolate that from people's enthusiasm. You can't really ever know, because you know the old saying, Gene, there's a million stories in a big city. So this year, the Republican enthusiasm has been way ahead of Democratic enthusiasm. And once President Biden bowed out of the race and the vice president came in, the Democratic enthusiasm shot up very quickly. And so now it's pretty much even Steven between the two parties.
Okay, good. All right, something else that we hear about all the time and people wonder what the heck it is. You get a poll result and it says within the margin of error. What the heck does that mean?
So this is a statistical thing, and it can trip people up. But essentially what it means is if I say I did this poll and the margin of error is 4%, that means that if I replicated the poll 100 times, in 95 of those 100 times, the results we're looking at would be plus or minus 4 percentage points in the example I'm using. So if I'm running for president against you and I'm at 50% and you're at 40%, if you replicated that poll 95 times out of 100, I'd be within 4 points of 50, you'd be within 4 points of 40.
Okay.
So often what you see on TV shows or in newspapers is they report the ballot test, the head-to-head, and they can sometimes say those results are within the margin of error. So if the margin of error is 4% in a poll and I'm only ahead of you by 2 points, we would say, or we should say, there's no clear leader right now because the results are within the margin of error.
Okay. Now, I imagine you've been doing this a while. This polling world has changed a lot. Fewer landlines, different ways of communicating. How much has that made your job, and how much has that impacted the accuracy of the polls that we're seeing?
So if it takes you more time to connect to those 300 people or 600 people, you know, it's more dollars, right? Because it takes you more time to find those people. So the cost of polling has gone up. People are less likely to engage with us.
Okay.
The cooperation rate, as I call it, so that makes it harder as well. So please, if you get a call on your landline or your cell line,
Answer it.
As a member of our trade group, the American Association of Political Consultants, please answer it. They're not trying to sell you anything. And that's a way for both sides and the public to know what's going on.
Good. In the minute or so we have left, I'll put you on the spot. I want to have you make some predictions. Pennsylvania, huge battleground state. We all know that is why the presidential candidates have been all through the state and will continue right up to the November election. What does it look like now? My understanding is, looking at the polls, that they're in a virtual tie for the president. So how does the presidential race fall out? What eventually happens in PA, the presidential race, in your view?
So I write a twice-weekly political newsletter called the PA Political Digest, and I occasionally report polling. And it's so odd to see what I refer to as a hard tie. I'm at 48. You're exactly at 48. The law of averages is you don't get that. So no candidate has been able, for president, to really get out ahead. If the election were today, I think it's still a slight lean towards Kamala Harris.
Okay.
In the Senate race, I think Bob Casey has his first competitive race for Senate ever.
Okay.
Dave McCormick's giving him a run for his money. So again, if you're watching this at home or wherever you are, make sure to vote either in person or by mail, because they try to make it easy for you.
So you're not going to make any kind of commitment on the Senate race? It's just going to be close, you're going to tell me, right?
Well, Bob Casey has never had a tough race.
Okay.
It's October. He's now in his first tough race. He's below 50 in most polls. That's danger zone for most incumbents, because it's harder for an incumbent to get back above 50 if they're below than it is for a challenger. So I think both those races would lean Kamala Harris and Casey, but there's still, as we tape this, almost 4 weeks to go.
Good. Well, thank you, Christopher. Thanks for coming on. Greatly appreciate it. Hope to have you on again.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to go away for commercial. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about what it's going to take to create new jobs here in Pennsylvania. We're going to be speaking with Luke Bernstein, who is the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. Back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by
Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. My guest here now is Luke Bernstein. Luke is the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. Luke, welcome to the program.
So great to be with you.
I'm glad that you were able to come on. So you're just now decompressing after the Chamber's big event of the year, the annual Chamber Dinner, which this was a milestone, wasn't it?
This was number 40, and it was a great opportunity to celebrate previous dinners and carry on that tradition of bringing people together from all over Pennsylvania, leaders, legends, those that make Pennsylvania the special place it is. And as we're trying to look forward, how do we continue to make Pennsylvania more economically competitive, but take a night to celebrate all the things here in Pennsylvania that make us great.
And your guest this year was a very special person, as it typically is at the Chamber Dinner.
Serena Williams was the featured guest, and she was pretty remarkable. You know, one of the things I took away from this year with her, we asked her what she would like history to remember her. What would she like those in history to think about when they hear Serena Williams? And she said that she was a normal person. And that really jumped out at me, because she'll be remembered for not being a normal person.
Yeah.
And I think because in context, she grew up a very normal person and became this superhuman and remarkable person. But she wants to be remembered for becoming, doing all these things and not changing who she was, whether she grew up or now, being consistent throughout her life. So it's a great tribute, I think, to her upbringing, and to the Chamber that she came and shared that message with us.
Let me give you, before we get into some of the policy things, I want to ask you about a couple of other things the Chamber has been involved in, which I think are great. One of them is the Civics Bee, which you're doing with the U.S. Chamber. Just briefly talk a little bit about what is the Civics Bee, what are you guys doing with it? Civics
Bee, we started 2 years ago. It's an opportunity to engage middle school students in Pennsylvania on how to engage civilly in the civic process. And so it teaches them about civics, American civics, and also challenges them to use civics as a way to better their communities. We had our second competition this year. We're going to do our third competition next year, and we've worked with the U.S. Chamber and local chambers to get a really great amount of students interested, not only in Pennsylvania but beyond, and so it's been an incredible project that we've launched.
Well, congratulations, because that need to engage civilly is not only necessary at the school age, but necessary across the board. And I certainly concur with that and glad you guys are doing it. One other thing you've done the last couple of years is you've run a different contest, which is called The Coolest Thing in PA. So what has happened with that? How much enthusiasm have you generated with that?
We make so many incredible things here in Pennsylvania, and so manufacturing is unbelievable. But Pennsylvanians, we vote with our stomachs. So when it comes to beer and food and other things, so we actually took all the great things made in Pennsylvania, all the things that we manufacture, Zippo lighters, you take the lunar lander at Astrobotic, you take different racing fuel that's made here, and we also combine that with like the Schmiskit. We combine that with creamery ice cream and all the different things that make Pennsylvania special, the things that are made right here, and we highlighted them through a competition. The last 2 years, the Permane Brothers sandwich has won. I've told Permane's there has to be something cooler in Pennsylvania than a hamburger with fries and coleslaw. So we're going to do a third iteration this year, and it's really put into focus the great things that are made in this state.
Yeah, interesting. And as a native of the Philadelphia area, I would concur. We're going to have to get some geographical balance here.
Bassett's ice cream is pretty good.
Fairly certain, not to mention cheesesteaks, hoagies, and all those other kinds of things. But we're going to have to take a break here. But when we come back, what I'd like to do is get into some of the policy things that you guys have done as well. Those really critical things that, as we talked about, hit on the jobs issue and some of the things that the Chamber plans on working on over the next 1 to 2 years that are going to help that climate to where Pennsylvania can continue to become more competitive. So we'll be right back after this commercial break talking to Luke.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania American Water. We keep life flowing across the Keystone State.
Welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. We're talking here with Luke Bernstein. Luke's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Chamber. Luke, looking at policy issues, that is those things that will help move Pennsylvania forward, so we're creating better paying career jobs for our kids and others in the, within our Commonwealth. You've had a couple of notable successes in the last couple of years relative to tax, for example, because Pennsylvania was one of the most uncompetitive tax states in the country. Talk quickly about a couple of those things that have happened over the last couple of years that set us up, hopefully, for more improvement.
Yeah, and this is something obviously that's been near and dear to your heart and that you've advocated for a long time. And so continuing that, we were able to get the corporate net income tax reduced, which we were 49th in the country, and now we're moving where we'll be the 8th lowest upon full enactment. But it doesn't stop there. The world in terms of taxation has become incredibly competitive. The other states in this country are fighting for our jobs, our businesses to locate there. So we have to be proactive. Lowering the corporate net income tax, net operating losses, so companies that start up here can carry their losses forward and put them against future gains. They can't utilize that at all if they don't have future gains. So we were
I think you called that a startup tax.
It is a startup tax. It's a giant stop sign in locating business here. We were able to take down that barrier and get in line with the federal system. The federal government is at 80% cap. We moved Pennsylvania at 40, last in the country, to 80. Other pieces like permitting reform, it is hard to do business and to build in Pennsylvania. So we were able to get key legislation that expedites and streamlines our permitting processes. And I think the real important thing in Pennsylvania right now is, in an environment where we're right out on this really critical election and bipartisanship seems to be waning and distant every day, we were able to get, in a divided government, significant wins to move Pennsylvania forward and to make our state more competitive. Would we have wanted more? Yes. I think everyone at the negotiation table didn't get 100% of what they wanted, but what we were able to do is get policies enacted that will make Pennsylvania more competitive.
Talk about regulatory reform for a minute more in detail, because I know that is one the Chamber's been working on for years. And it's one of the ones that has generated some of the biggest controversy. And one of the most notable, of course, was relative to U.S. Steel, where we've seen the loss of a lot of investment through there as well as others. Talk a little bit about some of those stories and what improvements have been made in reg reform, if any, or is that one that you've really got to start working on?
Yeah, it's a great example. U.S. Steel is a company that was looking to build a next major plant, whether it be here or somewhere else. So they were down between Pennsylvania and Arkansas. They went to Arkansas, and when they went to Arkansas, the governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson, at that time said they could not only build but cut the ribbon in Arkansas before they would even get issued a permit in Pennsylvania. That's a challenge for us to take a step back and say, we need to do this more efficiently and more effectively. And getting that speed program enacted was a giant step in the right direction, but it's just the first step. We need to do a lot more. It needs to be easier to do business in Pennsylvania, to create jobs and build projects. And by doing so, we don't have to change or skirt any environment. We can have all the safeguards in place for the environment, but we have to do it better. We have to do it more efficiently. Automation is a key part of everyday business in America today, but it's still not a key part in the permitting process at DEP. So within this year's budget, there are funds to move and streamline the platform. If you can track a $15 pizza from Domino's in America, you should be able to track a $15 million permit in Pennsylvania. And so the new funds have been in place to do that, but we have to keep at it. The regulations that continue to pile up are killers on growing jobs and business, so we have to continue to knock those down.
How receptive has Governor Shapiro been to any of the recommendations you've made on the regulatory reform issues?
He's been very receptive on some of them. One of them, for example, is licensing reform. So previously, if you were a pharmacist, a really high-need industry in Pennsylvania, it took 26 days to get a pharmacy license to become a pharmacist. Now it's down to 1 day. Teachers, engineers, all of those professions require different licenses. Working with the administration, we've been able to knock down those timelines, which will get people into the process faster. But we need to do more. It doesn't stop at licensing. I think for us, that's table stakes. We need to take that a step further to really encourage and get this economy going so we can be competitive with other states.
Good, thanks. We've just got a very brief amount of time, but I would like to talk to you a little bit and ask you to comment quickly on the elections. I know the Chamber doesn't get involved in federal, but what are you planning? Are you planning to help drive the vote out? What are some of the things you're doing relative to the upcoming elections?
Yeah, we're really trying to encourage people to get out and vote, because I don't think people understand how important Pennsylvania truly is. We sit in this state. We know, we see all the ads. Other states are not like this. We have the presidential, the U.S. Senate, 3 targeted statewide races. We have 5 targeted congressional seats. We've got all these state House and state Senate. It is really important to get out and vote.
There's a lot going on. Thank you for watching Pennsylvania Newsmakers. We appreciate you listening to us here. I'd like to thank Luke Bernstein for being my guest.